So everyone, thank you very much for joining. We're joined here by Wilhelm Myrer, who is the CEO and founder of Empower. So they're a startup since 2018 that have been using blockchain to help get plastic out of oceans and to help boost plastic recycling by using blockchain to verify the plastic that is sourced and to sell this on and give it a second life. So there's some really interesting use cases, of technology there, but also how they're helping to help get plastic out of the environment and out of the oceans, but also working with some local communities in some of the poorer areas of the world to provide an alternative source of income for those communities for collecting the plastic and earning money that is verified on the blockchain. So super interesting, both use case of technology, but also social and sustainable cause there. Wilhelm is also the chairman of the Oslo Blockchain Cluster, which is a large blockchain community based in Oslo. So they've built a really interesting community there of some incredible people and companies, a little bit similar to the Crypto Carry Club that a lot of people are familiar with. So just before we start, a huge thanks to Tracer. So this Tech for Sustainability webinar series is sponsored by Tracer. They're a connected value chain platform for the diamond industry. So they use blockchain to track and trace diamonds throughout their life cycle, ensuring sustainable business practices and consumer trust in the diamond industry. And they show provenance and traceability and authenticity of natural diamonds from the mine and help the local economies where they're based. So anybody can find out more. It's community.tracer.com. That's TRACR. So thank you very much to Tracer for sponsoring this series and making it happen. If you could give an introduction to Empower, just to start, how you started it, why you started it, why blockchain, why you're operating. Just if you could give us an overview to start, that would be amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And great to be here. So thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'll start at the beginning, I think, which this is a kind of a long story, I guess, taking me up till we started Empowered. So it's really, I'm a lawyer by education, so I really went to law school in Oslo. But when I finished law school, I was doing this day trading. I was trading shares on the stock exchange. And I made some money on that. It was like 2003, 2004, so we had this boom market. So while I was applying for a job, I made enough money to live on it. So I did that for 2 years. The first year, I had like 400% return, so that was good and much better than the market, so I was happy with that. In the second year I had 40%, but then the Oslo Stock Exchange went up 50% in 1 year, so I did worse than the market. So I realized I need to do something else. And in those 2 years I've been doing a lot of trading in mining companies, small oil companies and things like that, which were volatile. So I had to kind of figure out a bit on the business model. So I started an oil and gas exploration company in 2005, 2006, and gathered a team, and we started by applying for exploration licenses we started by applying in the East Timor offshore round in 2006. And we got some investors in and, put together a team, and 2 years later we raised $70 million from US private equity company, and really hired a great team who knew what they were doing. I was right out of school, so I stayed at the board, as a director to learn, but because it was it was a fun thing, I guess. In 2 years we went from an idea into a company that was fully funded, and we had, could invest and buy oil fields in Turkey and Ukraine, which where we ended up with having assets. But then I figured I'd start a lot of other companies and do the same thing. So, and then in 2007, 2008, I started a mining company, and we went into West Africa to do exploration licenses. So you mentioned Tracer there, but definitely we're in the same kind of regions where they have both the gold and diamond mining and those kind of things. And we were looking to do the same, start a company, raise money, and scale it up. But then, of course, you had the financial crisis there in 2007, 2008. So we went in a completely different direction, and we just had to, fight to survive. It was this friends and family raising funds, and we managed to get it through. But it was kind of a struggle, and we learned a lot. But a lot of traveling then to Africa, which is kind of an important part there when you come to Empower as well. Just by chance, we were in Monrovia in West Africa in 2010. I was there watching, went to the stadium in Monrovia where they have national under 21 team were playing a football game. So we went and watched it because I know a few football, managers in Norway. And I said, yeah, we can check if there's any talent. We'll let you know. While we were there at the stadium and watched the game, we were asking like, do you have any football like league or things like that in Liberia? And they said, yeah, sure. We have a Premier League in Liberia. And oh, cool. Like, what does a club cost? And they were, yeah, it's expensive. It costs maybe it's $3,000 to buy a Premier League club. And I was there with my friend who was kind of coaching a sixth level team in Norway. So we were like, okay, that's $1,500 each, and we're the owners of a Premier League football club. So we bought that in Monrovia, and we were doing kind of academy and really building, training football players in West Africa. So we were a lot on the ground and learned a lot about how it works, the issues they have when it comes to unbankability, the IDs, and all that kind of things. So that's kind of a part of the background there as well. Yeah, later I started another oil company in 2012, and we were doing them in Middle East, working in oil fields in southern Turkey, all those things, up until 2014-15 when we had the oil crash again, and the oil price went from 110 to like $40 in a few months, and there were no funding for the exploration company, so we had to terminate that exploration company that we were doing, and really had to look again at what we were doing. I think at the time, I've been building several companies, and what I realized is, of course, like every startup, it takes a lot of work, and you work 24 hours, and it's, I've been working in oil and gas, and I've been learning this, but now I really want to do something that's fun, because if I'm going to, either I take a normal job and just apply for that and do that, and work 9 to 5, and then I have the spare time, or I only start companies that I'm really passionate about managing. So I think after that oil crash in 2015, I figured let's do sustainable things that's really good. And I have 3 kids, so it's also a bit about the driving force behind it. So I started a solar energy company in Sweden in 2016, which we're doing kind of rooftop installations and things like that. And through the solar energy business, we also started looking into blockchain. How can we do payments from when you're charging your car and pay someone with solar panels on the roof. And so 2016-17, we started working on kind of blockchain IDs. How can we use this in solar? Started looking at, the banking part of it. And we figured, okay, if we can use this really to handle some of the issues that I've seen when it comes to banking and doing transactions in West Africa, where you have a lot of people who don't have access to bank account just because they need $100 to open an account. They need another $100 to get a passport to be able to open an account. And that keeps so many people out of it. So 2017 in the summer, we started this new company, which was the predecessor to Empower, which is now, but which was just about building wallets and really decentralize the banking and make sure you could have your money on your account. So that's what we were working on, and we applied to this fintech accelerator in Oslo called The Factory, which was the leading accelerator in the Nordics. So I think they won the best accelerator in the Nordics, and we got in with this idea. But then we went into these workshops and we started working with the banks, and none of them saw the point in having a decentralized banking, of course. Which was maybe not that surprise, but we thought, okay, let's start using it. Let's find a use case. And we were looking for that. And yeah, January 2018, I met my co-founder, Simon, who is like an ocean ambassador in Norway, and been doing, he's a marine engineer. He's been working on, the plastic waste problem, as he says, long before it became popular. And he's also started his own NGO like a few years before, which are doing beach cleanups in the Nordics. And really was into that problem. So he asked me really, how can we use the technology to do something about the plastic waste problem? And that we met us in Oslo in January 2018 at a New Year's party. And we were in the kitchen, and drinking a glass of wine. And we stood there discussing for 2 hours, how can we use blockchain to solve this? And, the day after I made kind of a PowerPoint from what we discussed, and that became Empower. And, what we saw that if you put together the kind of poverty problem I've seen in Africa, and know how much people are willing to work, if you could give them a job and pay them directly without all the middlemen, all the, corruption in between. If I could pay someone $1 to clean up plastic waste, they would. And based on the kind of the discussion with Simon, we know that plastic waste is a huge problem all over, but it especially growing in the same emerging markets, developing markets. So that's where you really need to go in to handle it, and that's also where you have the most plastic entering the ocean. So we looked at these two and thought, okay, maybe we can use one to, solve the others. And then in Norway, you also have this plastic bottle deposit system where you get, if you take your plastic bottles when they're empty, you go back to the store and then you get 10 cents or 20 cents back. And that works. So the plastic bottle deposit system is the most successful recycling system in the world. Recycles 97% of the bottles just because, I get a small fee by delivering back. I take it out from the rest of the waste and I put it back there. And I like a salary in Norway is 10 cents is nothing, but still you do it because it's down to this human behavior. I get rewarded if I do it this way and not if I do it that way. So even if it's a very small reward, I'll do it. So we figured if we can use blockchain, we can really create these tokens as rewards. And wherever you do this in the world, you should be able to get the token in return for your plastic. And then we will be able to incentivize really cleanups and collection of plastic waste anywhere. And those guys that knew in Monrovia who were not making any money and just desperate to do anything and get the job, we could actually put up just the collection point. They could bring their plastic there and we could give them tokens in return. And there would be no middleman. We could send that directly to Norway as long as someone had a smartphone. And so that was kind of the starting point in early 2018. Immediately when we launched that idea, we had a lot of traction. And I think in the first year we did pilots in 8 countries, and we started getting approached every week by organizations and governments and individuals who wanted to use this system, bring that system there. So I think now after 2.5 years, we have been approached by people in more than 90 countries saying that, okay, you need to come with this to Panama or Tanzania, India, Indonesia, China, because this is the worst place. This is where plastic is a huge problem. And you have something that might be a solution to it. So it's been last 2.5 years with Empower been really crazy when it comes to the traction, and it's also incredibly inspiring that we're actually working with the solution that people seem to need. And it's so that's I guess the background of Empower. Then when it comes to the Oslo Blockchain Cluster, just to take the background for that as well, when I had the solar company, we entered into something. They had a solar energy cluster in Norway, which was then a gathering of all the new companies in solar, but also the big like Scatec Solar and big energy companies were in this kind of cluster, which met like every month, and they had this network where they connected and helped each other, and it was really hugely beneficial and was growing rapidly as a network. And it was really for me, as I was new in solar then, we got so much back from it. So when we started our first blockchain company and doing this wallet and decentralized banking, we looked at where can we go in the blockchain space, where do we find the others, and it wasn't anything in Norway at the time. It was you had some players doing their own things, having their own meetups in their own offices, but it wasn't any interaction between the different parties, and definitely not between like IBM and the small startups. They were very random. So we figured if we can just make one neutral arena where all this can meet up, we really have a chance to exchange experiences. And since we're talking about blockchain technology, which is kind of global by nature, as it's cross-border and all those kind of things, it's not like we as a Norwegian startup compete with other Norwegian companies. You'll compete with anyone, anywhere. So it's if Norway is going to build anything in this sense, being competitive and new technologies, we need to work together. So the whole Oslo Blockchain Cluster really started like that. I went and talked to, the guys in the big companies like Microsoft, IBM, Ernst & Young, the big banks, but also all the startups, and everyone was really in need of this place to meet without having, we're always positive, and it was about really finding good solutions, see where we could have synergies and work together. So we started that back in, it was also early 2018 when we started that, and it's been growing. Quickly got a lot of members in, and it's been a great network for us, both in Empower and in general. I think it's a good place to. We have had a lot of good discussions, as and, in this kind of clusters, you exchange ideas and you meet people actually, like a new technology like blockchain, really you don't always find expertise and people are knowledgeable, but in that network we really had good meetups and a lot of really competent people. And I think there are a couple of Norwegian startups and companies that are kind of leading in their spaces within kind of the blockchain space. And I think that's also, partly because we built this kind of partnerships and cooperation, and we can help each other when it comes to it.
Well, no, thank you so much for that introduction. It would be really good to hear more about Empower, how that actually works. We've had a question through from Cliff. So that question is, what happens to the plastic once it's collected? But it would be great to hear more about not just what happens to the plastic once it's collected, but how do you pay the collectors? How do you make it work? Do you have set rates for the plastic? Do you give the money to them in digital currency, or do they have digital wallets? Because I know that one of the problems with plastic collection has traditionally been that when they were paid in cash, that money was often stolen from them or taken from them. So paying in cash is often not a viable option, but these are people who don't necessarily have bank accounts. So how have you come around the practicalities of collecting the plastic, of checking it, of sorting it, of proving that it is in fact recycled, and then paying all of the plastic cleaners?
Yeah,
the plastic pickers, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of things. What we did, I mean, when we started initially the company, I guess it was incorporated in February 2018. Like 1 month later, we put out this Facebook post, really, where we said that you can remove your own plastic footprint by donating $3 a month. We will clean up at least 3 kilos of plastic waste. And we got a few people who just signed up. And so like in April the same year, we did the first beach cleanup where people could deliver plastic waste, and they downloaded the app. And for each kilo they delivered, they got like 1 token that we made. And we backed them, each token with $1. So they could exchange it immediately for $1, or they could just keep it, this token EMP, like we call it, like an Empower coin, to do that. So we really kind of made some kind of stable coin to do it. And but what we saw when we did this initially in Norway was that most of the people who got that EMP, they were not interested in getting that dollar, but they wanted to donate it to cleanups elsewhere. So that's kind of why we also expanded pretty quickly internationally. We saw there was an interest in both funding cleanups, and we saw that it's an interest to fund that in other countries. So we started matching those sponsors with cleanup organizations around the world. And as soon as we had done the first cleanup in Norway, we started getting these emails and being approached by cleanup organizations in other countries. So in June the same year, we did the first cleanup in Mumbai. Since then, it's kind of just kept incoming requests to do it. So we set up, second cleanup in Mumbai, and again, we made them download the app and get the token. But of course, what we saw then was many of these, they need the local currency immediately to be able to buy things, because they are poor and they will need it you can't use the tokens yet. So for the last, 2 years, it's been, we work always with a local organization who will take care of the collection and recycling. And they also own the plastic, so we don't do that, but we just support them really with matching them with sponsorships and funding. So it might be individuals who want to fund cleanups, it's companies who fund up, who fund cleanups, and we also have we have these companies that come to us and say, okay, we are selling sunglasses or sneakers, and we want to really have an impact. And for each one we sell, we want to make sure that more plastic is cleaned up than we have used and things like that. So we had also just within the first 6 months from we started, it was new movements who launched sneakers that for each pair they sold, they donated $1 to clean up. So that went to cleanup organizations in India and Laos and those kind of things. So they can make kind of impact products that were also traceable, because when we issued the tokens, we had the kind of the time and date and how much plastic was delivered. So we could also give them data on where their money went. So that was kind of the funding part of it. And we had a lot of learnings on the ground, and we did kind of collection in Mumbai, we did it in Norway on beaches here, we did it in Laos in the jungle where they had no infrastructure at all, Indonesia, later in Africa. And of course there was an issue, some places that don't have Wi-Fi, they didn't have smartphones, So we needed to pay out in the real, local currency. But what we did then is more using these tokens as a way of reducing kind of the bank transaction cost. So we issued them the tokens, but the local collection points or the partners, they immediately exchanged it for local currency. And then when they had enough, like aggregated enough tokens, we could do a bank transfer instead of doing, one bank transfer for every kilo that was collected and $1, which is impossible. You can't do that with Western Union or a bank because of the bank fees. But when they started aggregating them locally, we could eventually do it when they have 1,000 tokens. It's then you can do it again, and it won't eat up the whole kind of donations. So that's a bit how we did, how the system has been working. And now we just launched kind of the second version of the deposit app now, and it's a lot of development there, on a lot of potential really on the banking, the unbanked. So we are gotten companies in or want to fund kind of microcredits and things like that. So based on the history of the waste pickers, how much waste they deliver over time, they will be able to apply for a loan. And it's also, possible to get insurance or have a savings account by putting them, tokens into a certain account. You can get an interest and things like that. So we're really looking into that part of it a lot, kind of this potential in making a really network based on tokens, but where you just use it to empower and bank the unbanked. So that's that's a lot of what's going on that app and collection part. So I guess the first 1 year and 1.5 years was really about the collection and deposits, and then since early 2019, we really have dived into the issue that you brought up there as well, the question on what happens to the plastic. Because what we saw was, the infrastructure is so different. Like in Laos, in the jungle, they put the soft plastic into the PET bottles because that was the only way. There was no roads or anything during the rainy season, so they had to take care of it locally. While other places like in Mumbai, there's a quite advanced recycling industry. So a lot of the plastic can be sold, and then the non-recyclable ends up in landfill, which is also another issue. But it's a lot of the options for what you collect, and this really differs. And again, in Norway, you have an established system for a lot of the collected plastic as well. So what they've been doing is instead of kind of solving it one place, we try to build this tracking where since every plastic that is collected, every piece of it, and all the kilos are registered digitally with the organization that collect it. We're creating then this kind of system of mass balance where how many kilos are at that collection point, and whenever they send it on, if it's for recycling or for landfill, we can track it and see where it goes. So we make these digital handshakes between the stakeholders and create kind of a digital ecosystem. So we have a lot of pilots now and have had that during the last year where we have different brands and companies that want to source recycled plastics as well, and especially plastic with the social impact or environmental impact that they know where it's coming from. So using this kind of deposit system with the registration in exchange of tokens and keeping that collection data and tracking the materials through kind of the supply chain into products again is, that's what we have been building the last year. And we're getting the first products actually made out of the plastic that was collected now. So in the third quarter, we had the first kind of furniture company coming out with plastic that they made and that we tracked. And there's a lot of things happening in this space. I mean, globally, it's a huge focus on circular economy, recycling of plastic waste. It's Texas, I guess, both in UK and it's coming in EU, where you have to have a certain percentage of recycled plastics in new products. And so there's really a huge interest in using the plastic as well, which is good because then you can, for the collection waste pickers on the ground and collection companies, they can both get funding for those who want to help clean up, but there's also a way of selling the materials that they collect, and it's getting a higher value because of pressure really on the companies and brands to use more recycled plastics.
Oh, great, thank you so much. There's a few questions have come through about blockchain. First of all, why blockchain? Why is blockchain needed? Specifically in this context, you've touched on the use in payments, but how are you using blockchain to track the plastic from a traceability perspective across its life cycle? Are you using any other software or any other methods of tracking the waste that's collected in the plastic once you've collected it? So it'd be interesting to hear more about that. Why blockchain and how blockchain in the plastics journey? And to add on to the blockchain question, Nigel has also asked about the environmental perspective of blockchain and how do you manage that relative or against the overall possibility of good relation to the circular economy and blockchain. And of course, some blockchains like Bitcoin have a very heavy environmental footprint, but I read somewhere recently that some of the newer blockchain protocols use less energy than some of the apps that we use on our phones, like Facebook and WhatsApp, in from a data and energy perspective. So,
yeah, for sure. I guess the first question, I mean, we looked at when we started out, it came from this bank and bank. So our starting point was that we can use these tokens for, cross-border transactions by really using kind of these wallets. We can send $1 incentive, like a, digital deposit fee to anyone, anywhere. And, it's kind of impossible to do that. I had this issue when I was running companies in Middle East and Africa about banking costs. It could take 3 weeks to send money to someone in West Africa. And that was really, I felt pretty badly that, this is something that it will be replaced by better technologies, and we could start using tokens immediately by issuing them, and it would save us a lot of cost in these transactions. And it worked from day one in doing it that way. Using it as an accounting system, really.
What blockchain platform are you working with?
Yeah, I mean, that's another of the things you touched upon, because we started the first tokens we made and we had the pilot we used Ethereum, but then we quickly figured out it took too long time to do it, and it was also back then too high cost to do it per transaction, because we're looking at sending very small amounts and a lot of transactions with very small amounts. So we're using Stellar now, Stellar network, which is very low transaction and very low then also the energy usage is a permission public blockchain. So it's the energy usage is also completely different than what you get on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So that's that's really answered a lot of these questions that we got in the beginning as well. Both the cost and the energy consumption. And this network is quite good, and so we use it. Basically the kind of global network that we're building now of wallets in different countries and collection points where you can exchange it into local currency is kind of a powerful tool just for any transactions that we kind of will work on for the banking and then bank part. So that itself is a good reason for the blockchain in our view. When it comes to the supply chain, it's a question, as you say, it's down to the cost and energy again, but also, where do you need it? So it's something that we're working on with the different companies now to see what kind of data is beneficial and that is needed for all the stakeholders to have access to, and really keep it as little as possible on the blockchain, just because of the, cost of it and, how much data. And then you have also, of course, privacy questions, what kind of data do you want there to be there and accessible? So you reference it, things like that. But it's under development, and we see it just blockchain being used in. You talked about this using in the kind of diamond value chain, and you see it just everywhere, from seafood to plastic to diamonds. It's just it helps when you can have some points in the supply chain that are immutable and accessible for everyone to check. So it's then just finding the right mechanism, and of course we use a lot of cloud services and things like that to make it scalable and cost efficient as well. It's different technologies working together to make it really good. But it's it's useful, but it's definitely something that we're very critical of. When and where should we use it and what's the use? It's ideally, it's not the question if it's blockchain or not. It's just about, how well does this work? How cost efficient can you do it? And you use it where you can save something. And, if that's because you would pay more to get that information, security otherwise, that's when you really should do it, when you can replace some of the middlemen and things like that. So that's how we work on it.
No, thank you. Nigel is saying that the Mumbai story is exciting, and what is the relative impact, for example, tons cleared to tons produced plastic ratio of the projects, and what is your long-term commitment locally to the initiatives in the developing world. And to add a question onto that, I know a lot of things locally in a lot of these areas have been impacted by the coronavirus and by local lockdowns, and some people not being able to work locally due to lockdowns. And I know you have a local initiative related to COVID-19 and to help look after the communities. If you could touch on that as well.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, we really been learning a lot, mostly, I think. So just by doing all these pilots in the different places, like Mumbai, we also, did this in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and all these places. And it's, our goal has been to kind of find something that works and can help everyone anywhere, which is scalable. So that's really, we've been working with this local organization, trying to help them from the beginning, and seeing those expand. But we have also tried to keep it to, at the moment, one organization in each place just to learn. But the key thing that we're doing is we actually, we're trying to make this as a platform and tools where any organization could just start registering how much they do, upload the right information, verifications, and then match with different sponsors themselves, and make this kind of a very transparent place where anyone who wants to clean up can match with organizations, if it's even in their city, but in a certain country they want to support. So we have been building up this quite a lot, and we've been doing this cleanups in 16 countries, and it's about 6,000 people directly involved in the cleanups, making money from it. And of course, the impact in the communities is, of course, even bigger. And for each waste picker that makes money, it impacts their families and things like that as well. But it's very early stage. I mean, definitely see we're starting to get to the point now where we can kind of open this up to anyone and really have a huge impact. So that's exciting things that we learned about, what is the minimum added value for these organizations to be able to do what they do. And by giving them these tools and funding, since we don't go in, we don't own these collection points. It's the local organization or people, and they create companies or NGOs to run them, and they get revenue, and they can really build a business as well. So it's kind of a more impact coming there. I guess during COVID, since we're like mainly a software company, we're not that impacted ourselves, in the sense that we've really been able to focus on the development part. But then you have all the organization on the ground, of course, and we had to lock it down, like in Tanzania, Nigeria, India, especially. Everything was locked down. So of course the waste pickers, and they also live out of that. They end up without any revenue. And we also started getting approached by a couple of other waste picker organizations that contact us and ask, okay, can we use your system now to be able to get kind of credits, so we can get paid now with the token, and we'll clean up when it's possible. But right now it's impossible to sell the plastic. It's you can't even go out and collect it. So we have been working on that. So since May, we launched kind of this COVID-19 campaign, where we kind of get donations again from individuals and companies that want to help, and we can then issue tokens to different organizations. Started out primarily with Africa and South Africa, an organization there in Nigeria, where we can pay regardless if they can deliver now, then they can get kind of a microcredit based on they will have to deliver later and to do the work. But it's possible to give them immediate kind of relief, create jobs. At the same time, we still kind of invest in local infrastructure and set up a system where it's, you build up those collection points and make it possible to run it also long term. So it's, we've been doing that for the last couple of months. So it's, I think it's desperately needed. And now we're having, we had some of these collection points opening up in July again and start to make money, but now you have the second wave. So I think it's, it's easy sitting in Norway during COVID, because you sit at your home, watching cable TV, and you're online and you can do whatever. But then we see these people who don't have everything, and, suddenly they can't leave their house, so they won't make any money. And it's not about not meeting people or going out for vacation. It's about, they can't go out to make, money enough for food. It's a different side of the world, I guess. I wish we can try to help at least.
About your use of blockchain, have you had any issues or problems or just points of discussion with any government or national waste regulators or national financial services regulators about your use of blockchain? Because obviously such a new technology, how has that fitted in?
Not really, but I mean, it's what has been kind of from our starting point and kind of my background experience there. We tried to stay away, I guess, from government relations. And we figure if we can do this peer-to-peer and just use this directly with local organizations, we don't go in and own, we don't establish legal entities, we just incentivize the local organizations to take care of it and do it. And they haven't really been involved with the governments in that way. And where we have been involved is because it's local municipalities and mayors that want us to expand it and do it more, because they see, suddenly someone else is doing a bit of the job that they were, could have been responsible for. And instead, the local organizations have been offered new land and things like that. So it hasn't been an issue, but it's been kind of quite a defined strategy from the beginning, based on the experience we had by operating in this country, that we tried to make it as clean and with just local ownership. And it's just like any kind of software platform, we shouldn't get in too much. But I think we will end up in those questions as we get bigger. And we were approached by kind of government in China, like it's a industry association there, which is kind of run by the central government, and they were interested in the tokens thing. So I don't think, but we haven't done anything there yet, and I think maybe that's might be a different story, what kind of approvals you would need to do it. But so far we haven't had any issue in Norway or any other place on that. And I think also when it comes to the supply chain and waste management companies, it's compared to 2 years ago, now people start to, 2 years ago, many didn't know the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain, but now many do, and they see kind of the need to have immutable data and something that's traceable and things like that. So it's definitely changed, and there's so many different projects using kind of blockchain, even without the tokens. So I think it's a lot is going to happen, even if it's a lot that's not spoken loudly about yet. It's definitely a lot of things happening there. It's becoming, I guess you all know this, but all these central banks talking about the digital currencies, it's just being normalized as it matures, I think.
Oh, thank you. There's a few questions, some interesting questions about how the plastic collectors are paid. Is that done by weight or by volume, for example? And also, has there been any resistance to them being paid in tokens instead of cash? Or I know we discussed before that this started about maybe cash not being ideal, but what has been the practicalities of paying the plastic collectors?
Yeah, we started with tokens, and then we figured out it's local currency that works so far. I think that's more about the maturity of kind of blockchain and the usage. So it's this pilots we have now with microcredits, it's really about that, and the work on establishing kind of partnerships with to have a kind of savings account and things like that. Because
do you run those partnerships yourself, or are you direct with all of the sort of the local companies and groups of people collecting the plastic?
Yeah, we are. So, but right now, like in almost every place, they get the waste pickers themselves want local currency that they can use, and there's it's not anything else. So it's what we are figuring. It needs to have a more value for them to start forcing them kind of to use the blockchain and the apps. And I think it's first when they really can make a difference for them in how to invest and get access to loans, and then that's where this will be super useful, and where also we can connect them with remittance or diaspora and the sending money from different places. Then it will be, I think that's the exciting part as this infrastructure comes in place.
Who have you been selling the plastic to? Have you seen any trends of what types of companies or why they're buying the plastic? Are they doing it for their own sustainability initiatives? Are they trying to meet certain goals? What is it in for the companies buying the plastic? Is it a marketing thing? Is it a PR thing? Is it a sustainability thing? What type of companies are they? And also to add on to that question, obviously you're selling the plastic to some companies who are using the plastic as part of recycled plastic products. What type of products is that? But also you get a lot of businesses and individuals putting in money to offset their own plastic. Have you noticed any trends in that? What type of businesses, what type of individuals are looking to offset their own plastic, and how do you encourage that?
Yeah, when it comes to the plastic, in the beginning it was, I guess, most different brands who wanted to be sustainable, eco products and things like that, and they wanted all the plastic to be, 100% recyclable. But it's still, you can find pretty big kind of sport brands and things like that, or big packaging companies that has eco lines where everything is recycled, and they would also then like to have that kind of social impact. So that's kind of was there from the beginning. I think in the last 1 year, I think it's really changed to all companies doing it, and also a lot of the petrochemical companies. And it's based really on this, both in EU, as I mentioned, they're having this new Green Deal, and it's a part of that is implementing these taxes. If you if you create new products based on plastic and it's less than a certain percentage of recycled, so it's starting to become necessity. They will pay more if they don't have it. So it's really a huge market with several of the largest companies in the world will need to source hundreds of thousands of tons of plastic, and it needs to be recycled. So it's not really hard to find buyers of plastic waste anymore, and that really will change and keep coming the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely a part, but you still have all the brands that want the story, and especially when you talk about social plastic, and you also want that added value of showing data from how much were they paid on the ground, what's the how does it change the conditions in those villages and things like that, and it's also added value.
We had to bring a potentially similar company up. We had Plastic Bank on this webinar series a few months ago now, and they're talking about obviously how they're using plastic blockchain in the plastic recycling initiative. Could you maybe share a few of the differences between what you're doing and what they're doing? And also one point that they mentioned was that the price of value of recycled plastic is now in fact higher than the price of buying new plastic because of the demand from a lot of companies for buying recycled plastic, and there simply not being enough produced. Do you also see this being as the case, and do you see that trend continuing with more companies looking to buy recycled plastic instead of new, what they call virgin plastic?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I heard some of these stories, like they exposed like a factory in China which were making virgin plastic, but then they started making bottles and they shredded the bottles and sold them as recycled plastic. But they made a bigger profit. And the companies who bought that, of course, thought they were buying recycled plastic. But
and that was direct from the company in China, the factory in China.
Yeah. So it's like, so that's really like the reason why we do also the traceability, and we see that, all the companies will need to know where the plastic is from, because otherwise this will happen, just because the recycled plastic is, costs a lot more. And if you're talking about ocean plastic and you can claim that without any proof, it's definitely the brands are willing to pay much more if they can get ocean plastic. So it's a trend, and so because of the taxes that are coming on virgin plastic, it will be higher and higher, value of the recycled plastic, which is super good, because if we can then make that whole kind of value chain transparent, then we can get more of that money down really on the ground, or incentives for people to collect and sort it themselves, even if it's like in Norway or UK or in whatever developing countries. Just it will help getting the volumes up, and it will put really the value where it should be as well. So I think that's a good development.
For sure, because then the more the recycled plastic is worth, the more you can incentivize people to pick it up. People simply won't throw plastic waste away, or the minute they see it, they will be incentivized to pick it up and to bring it to you or to recycle it.
Absolutely.
We've had a few questions in about the type of plastics. Do you have any specific types of plastic that you collect? Is it rigid or soft plastics? And what type of plastic are the most bought?
Yeah, that's also changing a bit what is mostly bought and things like that. But it's our original idea was really, when it comes to the donations and matching, is that it should be any kind of plastic if it's recyclable or not, and it's just to put the value on the value of cleaning it up, removing it from nature. But then, of course, for the collection companies and organizations, they will then also be able to sell parts of it. So they have that has a higher value for them. And then it goes to a lot of, like PET is a pretty, it's a global market,
Sure.
commodity. So that's definitely the easiest to, collect and sell again. In some countries, it's hard to maybe collect enough because there's already a market. If you go to certain countries in Africa where there's no collection, you can really collect huge amounts of PET, and that's the easiest for everyone locally if they can be matched with a buyer. But it's really a lot of investments into different recycling technologies, both chemical recycling, but also mechanical recycling, where you can use different types of plastic that you couldn't recycle before. And it's a lot of awareness kind of growing now. We have brands that say, yeah, we can't use ocean plastic at all, but then it's being proven that you can if you do it a bit differently. So it's just a huge development and building up knowledge. And I think mostly, most of the plastics can be recycled, but of course you need different processes in collecting and cleaning, and in the end also production of virgin needs to maybe be more standardized. And it's a plastic is not just plastic; it's so many different things that will have an impact on it. But yeah, it's more and more, and it's a lot of things happening all the time. So it's kind of an exciting field to see how it moves towards a more circular, really economy where everything can be recycled.
So does the fact of having been in the ocean, i.e. plastic that's being carried out from land through rivers and out into the ocean, does that affect its use cases and sellability of that plastic?
Yeah, I mean, the quality, if it's, in the water, or if it's just lays in the sun and things like that, it loses quality. So it's a lot of it will need, maybe chemical recycling to be done. And, sometimes you see companies just wanting to pay more for ocean plastic, and we try to go away for that, because what you really need to do is, of course, stop the plastic before it
gets into the ocean.
Yeah, because then it's higher quality, it's easier to recycle, and it's you don't want any leakage of plastic really. So it's sometimes you need to stop making this romantic thing about ocean plastic, or buying things made of ocean plastic, because that shouldn't be incentivized, I guess, more than necessarily, I guess, for doing the cleanup.
More than any plastic recycling from land.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the higher value you can do before it ends up in nature, the better. You don't want it out there at all, because it's so many bad things that you don't really know exactly yet either about, the danger of having plastic in drinking water and air and everything. So I think it's just, our goal is just to create these systems where you deliver it from your household and you get an incentive, and never throw it out at all.
Of course. Do you capture any details about the producers of the plastic collected, i.e. is it soft drink PET bottles, and the brand owners who issued them? Because the second part of that question is, if you've got details about what brands have the most plastic that is being found out in the environment, one could then see if it's something that those brands could do to incentivize the recycling or prevent the waste of their plastic. That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we do, because with each collection, when we register it in, they take a picture of the plastic collected as well, with the time and place it was collected. And we do find a lot of brands. We haven't done or used any statistics on it, but we are trying to build a system there where you can kind of, when something is collected, you can separate it into brands or just bottles as well. We created kind of in Scandinavia deposit system together with a tobacco company, so they could incentivize the collection of their tobacco containers and keep them, and they are now paying for each kind of container that comes back to them. So it's possible to do this kind of reverse vending systems, digital as well, and that's the extended producer responsibility is also a part of these new legislations that are coming. So I think all the brands they will at some point be responsible for paying for the collection of their own products again. So I think that's a really good and needed development, because what we have had for the last 100 years, I guess, is this linear economy where the ones who sell the products, they don't have to pay the cost of collecting or recycling.
Sure, and there's almost zero accountability on those companies for the plastic that they produce. It is for sure, it's a problem. An interesting question from Nigel, who's asking about your use case of cryptocurrency, digital currency. is that primarily as a way of making payments to get over borders, or is that a way of reducing transaction costs? I spoke to somebody recently from a company that works with crypto remittances. They said that often for, I don't know if this answers the question a little bit, but they said that for lower paid workers that are working in some of the poorer countries in the world, as a result of having to get money abroad, maybe through the gig economy or remote work, typically 10% of their earnings is lost to international exchanges and to fees, because these are people that don't have banks and don't have access to banking. So typically 10% of all of their money is just lost instantly to these payments. So is that your sort of primary factor in your use of crypto, or what drives that?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely. I think if you can do this without having that high cost at all, even just by, like we're doing now, aggregating them in the country before we do a bank transaction there, we kind of the regular banking system, we save a lot of money by doing one big transaction than having to pay this. If we were to send just one phone with PayPal or Western Union to each way speaker, it wouldn't be viable at all to do the system we're doing. So it's definitely reducing those costs, much more cost efficient.
No, interesting. Thank you. And Kieran is asking, what type of analytics are you running on the information that you're generating? And what are the major sort of questions you'd be looking at regarding that, about the plastic that you collect, maybe the companies that it comes from, how it can be used? Do you have any information about that? And that goes back to potentially putting the onus on those brands to have a little bit more accountability.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done too much on that part at all. We are kind of gathering all the data and we're creating these kind of certificates on how much and when things were collected, and but we are kind of building up large enough waste streams to be doing analytics on it. I mean, really finding out how much is collected in the different places, how much of what kind of plastic is recycled and what is not. And our goal is to have enough kind of collection points, enough data streams to be able to start using the data for recommendations, or, also to local or international governments, to how policies should be made and how can you change the legislation, what kind of reduced responsibility fees could you implement to ensure that this or that plastic was collected, which is not at the moment. So it's just tons of different things you can do once you get the data. It's just waste management has really been not the sexy business if you go back in time, and really been a lot of lack of transparency, even mafia and those kind of things. And it's I think just by getting all this data and transparency and getting mapped all the different streams, it's so much that can be optimized and done better everywhere.
No, thank you. I'm conscious we're at the end of our and of your time, but that's been super interesting. I've got one sort of final question just to throw in to you. What is really interesting is for me is the plastic sales, the companies that are looking at buying the recycled plastic. Has that been the easy part, finding companies that want to buy the recycled plastic? And have you seen any trends in use cases and any increased use cases in that?
I think, all the companies that, when we started with having that donation part, almost all the companies that approached us and wanted to donate to clean up, they were also interested in getting the plastic back. And that has been like from the beginning. That's a part of, the sustainability and their, DNA as wanting to do good and use recycled plastic. So that's been there. But the change, and if you talk about really big volumes, is definitely the legislations that are coming and the announcements, from UK and EU about the taxes, and that's driving the big petrochemical companies, the bad guys. They will also have to start using recycled plastic in whatever production. And so we are seeing that there will be, financial viability of building up this collection, also in places where there haven't been that before, where the value, like in Africa, where there hasn't been enough buyers of plastic to really make the local collection grow themselves. Like in India, you have a pretty advanced industry, so even without kind of adding the value of cleaning up like we are doing, there was already an industry there. But just by having this global kind of taxes coming in place and the need for these companies to use recycled plastic is making a big difference. All companies that produce things are in need of recycled plastic, and at the moment they have an issue with finding it. So I think that's a good sign.
No, that's been super, super interesting. Thank you so much to everyone for asking all of your questions. Thank you, Wilhelm, for joining and sharing. Thanks again to Tracer for sponsoring and supporting this series. So they're a blockchain platform for the diamond industry for proving and checking traceability and authenticity of the whole diamond chain, right from back diamond mines, and supporting local diamond communities and tracking diamonds throughout their life cycle. So thank you to community.tracer, that's tracer.com, for sponsoring and supporting the series. And thank you so much to Wilhelm for joining us and answering all of these questions on a very, very hot summer's day.